It's me, John D. Villarreal. We're getting ready for the show here, and we're about 4 minutes out. Lots to talk about. My voice is a little bit off here, but it's okay. Let's see where we're at here.
In one wash than the leading value detergent.
Thank you. Okay, we're getting close here. Lots to talk about. This is going to be fun. We're probably about a minute or two out.
Cold from moving in.
Getting ready here. We're about a minute out. Lots to talk about. We're going to talk about Trump, election 2024, maybe a little UFC. It should be good. Take your questions and comments.
Recycle.
And the Ad Council.
Management, staff, or advertisers.
Welcome to the John Villarreal Show. Now, here's John.
Hey everybody, what's going on? It's me, John D. Villarreal. We're back. What's going on? Yeah, hope everybody had a great Labor Day weekend and everything. Hope everyone's had a great weekend right here. School's back in session. My little girl's a little bit sick. You know, that's always what happens. And let's talk about what's happened around the world. Hopefully the U.S. isn't sick. There's just so much going on, metaphorically speaking, of course. John D. Villarreal Show here on Newstalk 1040am in the greater Tampa Bay area, everywhere from Sarasota, Wesley Chapel, Lakeland, Brandon, greater Tampa Bay, of course, St. Pete, and Clearwater, and a lot of other places. We're also live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. A lot to talk about right now, no doubt about it. I mean, we do have to start, I guess, with election 2024. So much happening right there that we need to zone in on. I've been saying for so long, and I do apologize, my voice might be a little bit out today, that I really feel, I've been saying it's going to be Trump and Biden. Oh, John, and oh, yeah, and all these, I've been telling you, it's going to be Trump or Biden. And what are we looking at? Trump and Biden. Now, there's still chatter. You've got Chris Christie saying, hey, he's going to chase Trump around the country and talk about, if he's a convicted and oh my goodness. And then, I mean, can you just stop, dude? Like, what are you doing, bro? Meanwhile, they're like, everyone's trying to like have these tough interviews with Vivek Ramaswamy, who's doing amazing. What's up with the DeSantis campaign? A lot of questions there. Meanwhile, Trump is just crushing. Nobody cares about the second debate, okay? We may get to some UFC news. There's a new champion out there, Sean Strickland, and, knocked out Israel Adesanya this weekend. That was a lot going on there. We can talk about that. But, I mean, what in the world? I mean, well, actually, wanted decision. Excuse me. Wanted decision. Let me correct that immediately. And just had a knockdown. That was really, really, really interesting fight on that one. And then Nancy Mace, right? Congresswoman Nancy Mace was on saying, "No, we might not do impeachment. It's better to do." And I'm not saying that. I mean, it's like, here's the thing. I'm not one to say, let's do the impeachment. But it's like, look, we need answers. We're having a hard time getting answers, in my opinion. That's number one. But number two, we're going to have how many trials on Trump and these crazy legal theories and 14th Amendment, and Mark Levin did a good job of going through, and on his show Life, Liberty, and Levin, of going through the, just how absurd and ridiculous this is. And he was commenting about he had a lot of comments about is Trump getting a fair shake on this, in his opinion, and all these types of stuff. I mean, just really went through it the way that Mark Levin, the great one, can do. And yet we've got all this stuff about, these reports about Hunter Biden and different things, and Philip Bump of the the Washington Post got crushed on this podcast, and it was like, there's no evidence, and just came off so schmarmy, in my opinion. And then he's like, okay, well, what about this text message to Hunter Biden to his sister saying, I've got to give 50% of my money to Pop? Oh, I don't know. I don't know what that means. Well, what do you think it could mean? Well, I don't know what it means. And this is my paraphrase. And then he's like, well, isn't that evidence? Well, I guess it's evidence. And then, can I leave? Thanks for having me. And then he just, dude, like, wanted to jet out of there. I mean, how long can this press just, cover? How do I want to say this? How biased, in my opinion, can this press be? I mean, this is what people talk about, the two-tier justice system. I mean, Professor Yu was on the program, John D. Villarreal radio show, talking about some different things. He's constitutional law expert, former clerk for Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Professor Jonathan Turley, who I think is a liberal, right? I think of George Washington or American, one of those two. I can't remember which one. And he's an eminent scholar. I mean, so many people have talked about this. You just can't have this massive tsunami avalanche of evidence on the one side and have crickets, nothing, no questions to the press. And did you see this thing? Let me do a little sidebar here. Well, let me finish that thought first, just to keep the audience with us. And at the same time, we're going to find out Trump is tax returns. Did he ever jaywalk? Did he jaywalk in middle school? Did Trump jaywalk in middle school? Because if he is, he can't run for president. You can't do that. But Joe Biden, nothing to see here. And speaking of seeing things or not seeing things, dude, President Biden was over there in Vietnam, and they were doing this press conference and stuff. And he was in the middle of an answer. First of all, he's rambling around. It just, dude, I'm not trying to be a punk. I'm really not. And we love and respect everybody. But, listen, being president is a tough job with tremendous amounts of responsibility. I mean, we've got this thing going on in Ukraine with the funding. There's a lot of serious things. The BRICS are bricking up, bro. They're getting more powerful. We're going to talk about that. Saudi Arabia has joined them now, I believe. And meanwhile, President Biden is just not looking super duper sharp, in my opinion, and kind of did a little bit of a pause, kind of a little shaky, a little bit of a thing there. And at some point, Karine Jean-Pierre just cut off the press conference. Okay, thank you. In the middle of that's the president's talking, and she just wrapped him up. What is going on, Paul? Let's bring in Paul at Villarreal right here. Then this guy, he's building up the Twitter. He's got all kinds of people following him. Let's go in order. Let's talk about this. Let's work in reverse order. What is going down with this whole thing in Vietnam, Paul?
Yeah, first let me just say this, John, and hello to everybody out there in the 1040 audience. Jonathan Turley is a professor at George Washington, just like you mentioned, and I just want to say that.
He's great.
What happened in Vietnam, President Biden was on a trip to two places. The first was a trip to India for the G20 summit, and then the second was a stop in Vietnam. And it's exactly what you said, which is when he's doing the press conference, he's at some point in the press conference, he said he's going to bed soon. And then soon, I think when he got wrapped up by Karine Jean-Pierre, he had just said something about John Wayne and quote-unquote Indians, and he was just kind of rambling off, and then boom, we got cut. And so it's like you said, it's you're cutting off the president of the United States, and it's just a terrible look. People were embarrassed. People were just confused. Like, what's going on here? Who's running things here?
This is the thing, and right. Let me jump in real quick, and let me say this: I'm not trying to be a punk, and neither is Paul, in my opinion. He can speak for himself. We love, respect everybody, freedom, peace, love, opportunity, equality for everybody, all that type of stuff, and that's extremely important. And we're not trying to look, he did so, look, and he made the gaffe in the one word, and you got this wrong, and it's not about gotcha. It's not about that. And listen, these trips, it's no small trip to Vietnam. And I think they talked about how, I think the Biden team has an ad out there or something, or a pack or something. One of these campaign things, I think, somehow had some ad about how long the trip was to Ukraine, and they had to fly in and take the plane. Look, these are grueling trips. There's no doubt about it. This would test almost anybody's stamina. Things can happen. You get dehydrated. You get tired. You're in different time zones. All kinds of stuff. No, we're not trying to be punks here. So, and we have to, respect that. However, and this is key. However, look, if it happens over and over again, I think it's something like 70%, which means a lot of Democrats do not want or President Biden to run or concerned about his age. You know the polling a little bit better than I do on that. And that's a huge number, dude. That's a huge number. And here's the thing. If there is a situation, and we've seen it, it's both sides. I mean, it's both sides now. I mean, you got to think of where we're at with the leadership of the country. And I don't think it's about age. And I don't think it's about a number. But I think it is about, kind of, are you up to the task? Simply because you need to represent the people elected you, right? It's not about an aristocracy. It's not about, whatever it is. There's a job to do. And the president, that's a big job. So to the extent that you see people falling downstairs and freezing up, and Mitch McConnell freezing up twice, and then people have talked about, Senator Feinstein. Now, I think there was a meme out there about, Barbara Boxer, who's going to run again. Not Barbara Boxer, Nancy Pelosi. And I think the meme, there was a meme, going on about Nancy Pelosi. I mean, at what point? Now, listen, Nancy Pelosi, of everyone we're mentioning here, I think is definitely the most there, in my opinion. And I'm not diagnosing anybody. I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving any advice or anything. I'm just a talk show host, but we have to talk about this Newstalk 1040 right here. And you have Senator Fetterman there. You mean, Paul, you're from Pennsylvania. I mean, there's just a lot of this going on now, and then so it raises the question. I'm going to put it right back to you, Paul. Who's doing the job? Or is the job being done? It's one thing if you're a congressperson or even a senator. When you're president, what did Teddy Roosevelt? The buck stops here. Where does the buck stop? Who is running policy? If President Biden can just get wrapped by his press secretary, and these press conferences, I saw something before I got on the air saying we should just do away with the press conferences because they're kind of a joke. Like you don't learn anything. I'll circle back on that. We have a book. I mean, what is learned in these press conferences at this point? who is this person? I'm not trying. I mean, listen, I'm nobody, right? I like to say that. I just know a lot of things, know a lot of people, but I can ask the right questions. So you really, it's not about left, right, gotcha. It's about serious questions of what is the deal? Like, do we have a level again across upper government there? I mean, is there an issue, even if it's minute? Is there an issue of just competency? I don't know how to say this, Paul, but you understand what I'm saying. People are concerned about this, Paul. The voters are concerned about this. Tell me about the polling on this, and it raises the question of if there is any kind of potential issue. Who is in charge, even on a moment-to-moment basis? Like if President Biden freezes up or Mitch McConnell freezes up, then what happens then? I don't know, dude. What do you think, Paul?
Look, the polling is overwhelming that people are concerned about Biden's age and his ability to serve office. As you said, it has nothing to do with age. I mean, we just saw recently Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State. He's 100 years old. He just made a trip to China. He's still talking, still conducting, his own business. It's not about age. It's about where you're at, what you can deal with, what you can handle. You mentioned the Vietnam press conference. Another thing that recently happened, I think it was about a week ago, was President Biden was in a Medal of Honor ceremony. And before the ceremony ended, he walked out. Like, he just walked out ahead of, early. And people are like, what are you doing? What's happening here? And Jean-Pierre, I think the next day, or the next briefing, basically said, he left because he was concerned that maybe he had some COVID exposure and he didn't want to, put anybody at risk. Well, he was at the entire ceremony. So you're leaving at the end, and that makes less risk. It just felt like we're not being honest here. We're not being straight here. And it's, like you said, has nothing to do with his value as a person or anything like that. It's just, again, are you up to the demands of the job? Can you do the job? And look, it's not just Republicans who are concerned about this issue. It's independents. It's Democrats. I don't have the polling right in front of me. I get it. But it's overwhelming, and it's among all groups. Among all groups.
And here's the particular problem
they're going to deal with.
Yeah, real quick, and I'll bring you right back in. Here's the particular problem. It's not about gotcha. It's not about anything like that. I've been saying it for a long time. It's the same reason in a different way. You're not going to displace Trump. It's going to be extremely hard. And I think people are starting to realize that, to displace Trump as the nominee on the GOP side, because he used to be the president. He's got huge name ID, and people saying, look back on if you're a conservative Republican or whatever, and you say, hey, listen, when Trump was in office, wow, things looked a lot better. We can use some of that again, right? So that you have some massive natural advantages as the GOP primary candidate for president, right? Similarly, how are you going to replace a sitting president, Joe Biden, who says he wants to run again? You're not. I've seen some different wacky theories about he's going to drop out and then it's going to be Kamala. They're going to drop out and it's Newsom. And Newsom says he's not running now. They're going to do it at the convention. They're going to do it right before there's no time to run the primaries, and then they're just going to back. I mean, who knows, dude? I mean, the best laid plans. I don't know how that's going to work out. But the point of it is this, and it comes right back to what you're saying, Paul. You have voters with these dramatic questions now. And yet, this is your nominee. And the Democratic Party, if they've shown anything, they've shown unanimity and a focus on power and trying to hold power, in my opinion. I mean, Paul, would you agree that that's the issue? That they are basically stuck with Biden and voters are now having big concerns. And now you can run a basement campaign when you're the nominee. You can't run a basement campaign as president. Or maybe you can. I don't know.
Yeah, look, I do agree with you. I do have the polls in front of me now, and it says 56% in a CNN poll of Democrats and independents aligned with Democrats are concerned that his age might negatively affect his physical and mental competence.
Wow.
That's Democrats. Imagine what independents and Republicans think. As far as the Democrats being, quote-unquote, stuck with Biden, yeah, I do think they're stuck with him. And one of the pollsters that I look at really closely, Richard Barish, He polls extensively. He's polled every possible Democratic contender, and Biden polls better than all of them against Donald Trump, who
That's the problem.
We know he's going to be the nominee. And I will tell you this, just anecdotally from being here in Pennsylvania, people feel comfortable with Biden. They still think of Biden from the 1980s. They still think he's Scranton Joe. They still think he's Uncle Joe. Whereas they're not so sure about people like Gavin Newsom and maybe some of these more leftward policies. So even though Biden governs to the left right now, people still have this nostalgia for him. And that's why he's able to compete in places like Pennsylvania, like the rest of the Rust Belt, whereas other Democrats wouldn't be able to do that.
Well,
and I do think they're stuck with him.
And it's not just that. I mean, I think the Democratic Party has moved so far left and is so woke and whacked out in many instances that when you talk about Gavin Newsom, who I think is a very capable politician, I mean, I think he talks the part, looks the part, does all that type of stuff. But you look at California, I mean, California is a mess, a tremendous mess. I mean, I think you said something like, someone said that, I don't know what it was. I don't know. One of these companies has like basically had $1 billion or something crazy of vandalism. Yeah. Just insane, dude. I mean, how do you run a business like that? Or Gretchen or Governor Whitmer, and those are your stars. I mean, very left wing. I mean, you know, there was the whole thing with the boat and the lockdowns and all kinds of different things going on there. If that's your stars, I mean, yeah. By comparison, Biden looks a lot different to, you know, the moderate electorate out there, I would suspect. And so the Democratic Party has a terribly difficult position. Sure, they're better at the ballot harvesting. Sure, they're better. They have the media behind them. They have there's a lot of advantages, but they have a lot of problems. And in fact, their traditional coalitions, voting wise, are really breaking up. As a lot of people, you know, that are basically, across the spectrum that are looking at Trump and looking at Republicans say, hey, I'd rather do that because this is not working right now. And we were talking, you know, before the show about how the economic situation is very problematic. I was watching a snippet from an expert from one of the auto groups out there, and it was like, you know, half of the people out there can't afford a car payment right now, like are priced out basically of the car market. That is devastating. That most people want, you know, half the market's basically a $400 or less car payment, and that's just basically unattainable right now on new cars because of where, you know, prices are, rates, everything like that. Like, it's just crazy. And there's issues with the whole EV thing, you know, and you know, there's everything that's really sort of colliding to create a very, very challenging atmosphere. So I don't know how this, and then also real estate market in many ways is frozen. I think something like, you know, that investors or there's a lot of homes that were bought up by investors, and now, you know, that's become problematic. I mean, the mortgage applications were down to like a almost 30-year low, 20 some odd year low. I mean, it is a perilous situation right now. Wages have not gone up appreciably, and yet, I mean, in comparison to inflation, inflation's outstripping wage growth, which means what? That your real wage has shrunk. So, I mean, you know, there is a lot of stuff going on. Now, meanwhile, we've got, I don't know what you want to call it, immigration, migrant, something crisis, quote unquote, in New York, Paul. I mean, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, all of a sudden, you have no less than View saying that they need to resettle them somewhere else. Well, what's the matter? I thought that was you were being unkind or possibly some kind of phobic or something. If you would have said that, you know, if you lived in Texas or Florida or Arizona or whatever 5 or 10 years ago, but now all of a sudden New York City has figured out that this may be a problem if you've got a bunch of people jamming up hotels or on the street or taking services that citizens are paying for, that there's whatever the limit is, at some point there is a limit. So, I mean, you know, these are all things that are sort of hanging over this election, and I'm not giving a policy pronouncement or saying one way or the other, but I'm saying that you know, these are things that are out there, let alone Ukraine and everything else. And now we have a president that's basically getting cut short by his press secretary in Vietnam, and people have questions. Paul, what do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I totally agree. And just coming back to what you said about the store and the loss issue, it's Target. Target told investors that they expect a $1 billion in inventory loss because of all the theft. That's one
insane.
store.
That's insane.
That is totally crazy. Because, like as we see in San Francisco and other places, people are being allowed to do whatever they want. and that's going to have a massive effect on that chain. It's also going to have a massive effect on the economy. As far as what you were saying about the immigration issue, it is affecting New York City, and it's also affecting Chicago. Right. And so people are getting upset.
Right.
And we're kind of seeing that what they call the not in my backyard thing. It's great if it happens where you are. It's not so great if it happens where I am. And now we're kind of seeing the effects of these policies, and maybe they aren't as popular as these people thought that they were.
And we saw it in Martha's Vineyard. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. I mean, there's so much hypocrisy. It's not even funny. And it's not about left, right, and gotcha, anything like that. It's about, these are real things, real stuff's happening out there. This is no joke. And we need some real leadership out there. So there's no doubt about it. Hey, we're going to talk about all this and more. I want to see you back here in about 5 or 6 minutes. You're listening to the John D. Villarreal Radio Show and live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, right here on Newstalk 1040. Appreciate y'all. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. If you're joining live, hang tight right there. We'll be back probably around 4:34, 4:35, something like that. I'm going to take a little break. We'll be right back. We'll keep it going.
Football.
Okay, we're probably like a minute out. Just getting ready for that.
A message.
Here on Newstalk 1040. St. Pete, Clearwater, all the rest. Also on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Hey, we're talking about election 2024. We're talking about what's going on in the news out there. And we're joined by Paul at Villarreal. Now, let's talk about Trump. Trump had a huge rally in South Dakota and was endorsed by Governor Nome out there. And now there's people that were saying, oh, maybe Governor Youngkin or Governor Nome are going to jump in or whatever. Well, Governor Nome jumped in with a big endorsement of President Trump. And if you didn't know that it was over, that pretty much is a signal, in my opinion, that it's over. This is going to be Trump. Now, you know, there's some weirdness and some stuff out there. I can't remember the senator's name. It was asked like, oh, he's going to vote for a Republican, but he might write a name in. You're going to have maybe some never Trumpers and some GOPE that are going to maybe try to get cute. But I mean, this is the thing. You can't say that things are super important and this election's super important and not say that you're going to rally around. And what was about the whole pledge and the RNC stuff and everything like that? Like, you know, I think people are starting to understand that it's going to be Trump. And win, lose, or draw, Trump and MAGA have control of the party now. So you have to wake up to that. But I mean, let's put a frame on it with the news here, Paul. I mean, you give us a sense, because you were live tweeting, you were kind of getting people up to date. Like, what happened in South Dakota? How big was this rally? I mean, I think when Trump walked in one of these stadiums, that people just went crazy.
Yeah, for the South Dakota rally, which took place on this last Friday, I think there were about 7,000 people. It was actually like a GOP event, the GOP of South Dakota event. It wasn't just a Trump rally.
Right.
But it was the largest event they've ever had. It was a huge attendance.
Of course it was.
It was the city that it was in is Rapid City, which is about 20 miles northeast of where Mount Rushmore is, kind of right there on the foothills of the Black Hills.
Nice.
And I mean, the crowd was like unbelievably fired up. They were happy. They were pumped up. Trump gave a really long speech. It was almost a 2-hour speech. And what one of the things that people remembered about it, or kind of struck people, was right towards the end of the speech, like he kind of transitioned from talking about like kind of the positive history about South Dakota, and then he started talking about kind of like the difficulties going through America right now. He got a little bit choked up. You don't really see Trump do that very much. And so like people were kind of struck by that, and I think people are understanding more like, look, this is important. This guy is facing 90 charges. He's going through all kinds of stuff.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, he's faced all kinds of persecution and stuff, and it's like, this is real. And of course, if it can happen to him, then it can happen to anyone. As you said, did he jaywalk? What's the latest thing that they're going to do? And it's people are thinking about that. But the event was very successful. As you said, Governor Nome endorsed him. She spoke right before he spoke. She said, look, I'm going to do everything I can to help him get elected. And, of course, Governor Nome, in the minds of a lot of people, is on the short list for potential vice president for Donald Trump. So if you made me give you a list right now of like 5 people that might be the vice president, I would say Governor Nome, Kerry Lake, Byron Donalds, I don't know, 2 other people. I think those 3 are like really high up on the list. But she's certainly there. And as you said, her endorsement is big. In fact, that pollster that I mentioned earlier in the show, Richard Barris, is like, look, this is a much more important endorsement than Kim Reynolds kind of, sort of endorsing Ron DeSantis.
No doubt.
It's just much more meaningful, And South Dakota and Iowa are not, they're adjacent. They're kind of diagonal from each other. But, of course, I'm sure they have crossover media markets and so forth. So people in Iowa are aware of what's going on there. And, yeah, it was huge. It was a really good event. And it's the first rally that he had since the mugshot, since the Fulton County Jail, the whole thing. And people were incredibly supportive. In fact, there was a woman behind him that had on a T-shirt with the mugshot. So as we know, we didn't really have a chance to talk about this because we weren't here last week.
Right.
He's been able to flip the whole mugshot thing, which was supposed to be a negative, and turn it into a massive positive. And it's becoming kind of like, it's iconic. And just seeing that woman with the T-shirt was representative of that. So I thought it was a huge success. And we'll talk more about the next day, which was him going back to Iowa. But the South Dakota event, the rally went really well. He was into it. The crowd was into it, and he did. He got a little bit of, got a little emotional there towards the end.
Well, you're talking about someone that is an American icon, whatever you want to think about him. You're talking about someone that had the #1 show on television, with The Apprentice and everything like that for so long. You're talking about a global brand, the art of the deal. There's so many things, Trump water, Trump plane. I mean, the whole thing, it's just so much that goes into it. And now, like you said, this guy who's already been president of it might face all these years in prison. I mean, like, you just distill it from a, step back from the actual right now, minute to minute partisanship or whatever. However you feel about President Trump, like the whole thing's a bit crazy, right? And someone else said that too. Like, I forget who said that. And a number of people probably said it, but if you had President Trump in there saying they were going to, and again, this is a caricature. This is not what's actually happened. And I know the separation of the DOJ and all, whatever. But just as a super high level, 50,000 foot view type of thing, if the Republican president was in there and they were indicting the #1 Democratic opponent, what would the press say to that? Like, it's just getting crazy, dude. It's just so beyond all levels of craziness now. Meanwhile, other people might have classified documents, Vice President Pence or President Biden. Oh, it's okay. Oh, whatever. I mean, and I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm making a fun of it for the show here, entertainment value, but, extremely, paraphrasing, and we're having some entertainment fun there. So, Paul, look, let's bottom line this. I want the viewers to hear and the listeners on 1040 Newstalk 1040 and on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn to understand this. Where was this going to land for Trump? Do you think that, let's start with, do you think he's going to be the nominee? Because I do. I think that there's just, that's almost a lock now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any chance that he's not going to be the nominee. Now, there was some report, and I don't remember where it came from. I can't, but this is a legitimate report where it's basically the insiders, the establishment GOP, even though they know nothing's affected him at all. If anything, it's made him stronger. They're still hoping that as we keep going along these legal processes, that somehow at some point the GOP voters are going to turn on him. I just can't see that happening in any way at all. And again, like I said, what's happening is a strengthening. Look, as we know, if this happened 20 years ago, he would have been finished because that's the way it would go back then. But we're in a different era now. We're in an era where people have lost faith in various institutions. They heard Russia for years and nothing happened. They've heard different things. They don't necessarily trust these things that they're seeing. And, unfortunately, that's where we are. And
well, and like you said, for reason, and I'll just say this super quick.
Yeah.
I mean, Russia. Oh, okay, that's fake. Oh, mask or whatever the thing is on that. I mean, okay. This story, that story. Okay, not true. Oh, hey, Wuhan. It was natural causes.
Right.
Oh no, maybe it may have come from a lab. Okay, I mean, you can go on and on and on and on. And Josh Hawley was fleeing. Oh no, everyone was actually told to run out, and he was one of the last ones.
Right.
I mean, what are we doing now, dude? I mean, we can go back to different news reports. President Obama, acted stupidly stuff. I mean, there's been so many different things.
Right.
It's extremely hard to trust any of this. We were told that we were gonna, that Ukraine was gonna win. That's not over yet. That's not, from what I'm seeing. I don't know. I mean, now there's hedging bets. If you want your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you want your plan, you can keep your plan. I mean, there's just a litany of this. And the thing of it is that all these things matter terribly to the American people. It's one thing to have, some, being slightly punked out or having things slightly more expensive or whatever that it is, if you're super rich. But if you're out there working, this is a tough deal. So yeah, people have a reason, many reasons to be pretty skeptical of what's going on, Paul.
They do. And it's not just, and unfortunately, I hate to say this, but it's not just the institutions. Like, it's not just the FBI. It's not just the DOJ. In my opinion, and from what I come across from reading people's stuff on social media, they're losing faith in the jury trial system. Like, look, you can have different things happen with left-wing protesters in Portland, and nothing happens to them. It doesn't matter if all the facts are there. It's essentially, it looks like from the outside, a jury nullification thing.
Meanwhile, other people waiting for trial. Meanwhile, we've had it. Sorry, real quick, Paul. Meanwhile, we've had a special counsel allegedly that had to update things because sorry, we didn't give all the information to the defense. And all the evidence, stuff like that, what are we doing? Yeah. And it all comes back to the same thing, which a lot of it, which is everything's become political and politicized, and way too much. And this goes back. I have to say it. To President Obama, or even maybe even a little bit before, but certainly was ramped up then, where everything was gonna. Hope and change, and we're changing everything, and here we go, and everyone's a radical now, bro. Everything's politicized, everything's hyper-partisan, everything's radicalized. It's not about, we're not, whoever you voted for, wherever you're at, whoever you like, you hate Trump, you love Obama, you don't like President Obama, you love Trump, you're in the middle, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point of it, that it matters. That's fine, but we're going to set that aside for now. For the purpose of this argument right now, it doesn't matter. The point is that things are so out of control that we need to find a way forward. If we can't, like Paul's saying, and I'll let him finish the thought. If you have jury nullification, if you have people that are maybe not getting all the evidence of the trials, if the system doesn't work. If we're politicizing the system, then you do not have a system. And if you don't have a system and a fair justice system and a constitutional, and we just saw this in New Mexico. The governor, there's emergency. Yeah. No more Second Amendment, no more open carry. Like what? What you then you don't have a constitutional republic. Then you don't have a country. Then it gets ridiculous. It doesn't matter. The people in charge just do whatever they want. It's just some kind of quasi you're walking down in this more centralized governmental rule, and your rights are just subject to whatever, almost like there, Paul. That's the problem.
Yeah, look, a lot of people feel like you're like you said, you're walking down the road towards kind of a Brave New World or 1984 Orwell type of situation, and people don't want to live in that. They don't. And coming back to the jury issue, we also saw in the case of Russia where the whole the issues surrounding the FISA warrants. There was somebody who was charged. I don't remember. Sussman, maybe his name was. He was charged. I think I think Barr's DOJ charged him. He went to a jury trial in D.C. and they just negated it. And one of the jurors after the trial said, "We have more important things to do than this." Well, if you're not going to hold anybody to the law, if you're going to not hold one side to the law, but the other side gets charged for jaywalking, people are going to lose faith in the system. And so I think that's what's happening for President Trump, is that people are they're just not buying into this anymore in terms of kind of what is being done to him, or the smearing.
Yeah, and that's why I've been saying over and over again, people are like, oh, that's emotional connection Trump. It's not that. And people thought they were going to, this some would say lawfare was going to, crush Trump politically and everything like that. But it's like, the thing of it is, there's this percentage of people that are never Trump. But there is now, I would say, a very, very, very much bigger percentage of people, particularly on the GOP side, that are only Trump, because they see what's going on. It's not about Trump. It's about the symbol. If we let them pick our candidate, if we let these tactics work, and I want to bring in Nancy, Congresswoman Nancy Mace here, because that's all part of it too, because now all of a sudden she's saying, like, you have all this mounting evidence. Oh yeah, there's a lot of evidence, but we don't want to do impeachment. What? You did impeachment off of something that was proven to be a hoax with the Russiagate.
No.
Or this whole call with Ukraine. I mean, this is insanity. And yet you see serious evidence here. You're getting stonewalled in certain situations, and yet you're just saying that, we don't want to do that. It could hurt some members in some swing states. What are you doing? You know what I mean? Like whether you do, whether you don't, you can talk about that, but that's not the reason not to do it. So then what? So let's take that to the extreme conclusion. So if you can show that basically, Biden did something extremely egregious, I'm not even gonna put a scenario out there because I just don't want to be hyperbolic about it. But let's just say extremely egregious. Well, you would just say, oh, you know what, we can't do anything because it might hurt some members. It's like what are you talking about? You're just taking that off the table, but you let the other side do whatever they want. Impeach him not once but twice. And this is why people are like on the Republican side, Paul, are like, what is going on with the RNC? What's going on with our quote unquote leadership? Like, Leader McConnell, or now, this is a joke. And these people think that they're the adults in the room or something. Like, what are we talking about, Paul?
Look, people are really frustrated with Nancy Mace. And I can tell you that just from being online. And I'm talking about Republican people like of the base. And just coming back to what you said before about Trump and the emotional connection. As you said, it's not about emotional connection to him as a person. It's him, as you said, as a symbol. It's him as somebody that's standing up against this. It's him as somebody who is a multi-billionaire, who is fearless, who will take this stuff on. Whereas we said people like Nancy Mace will crumble. But nobody wants that. They want somebody who will say, look, this is nuts, and we got to do something about it. Or we have to, this seems like a little bit out of line. We got to stand up to this. I can tell you here in Pennsylvania, there are signs up here. You still have signs, Trump 2020, everywhere. They never came down because he's a symbol, not because of him, man, but because of him as going against this radical change that's taken place in the last 15 years or so. So there's no question about it. Now, coming back to Nancy Mace, look, she got herself into political trouble, so to speak, around the time of the, I think it was the first impeachment, the Ukraine thing. because she agreed or said that Steve Bannon, who was an advisor to President Trump, should be held in contempt. And it's kind of like, what are you doing? We need to have, we need to like be unified here, and you're kind of stepping outside of that. So much so that she did this, that President Trump endorsed a primary challenger against her. She became so concerned about that she literally went to Trump Tower and took a video of her with Trump Tower in the video frame to pretend that she was still with Trump. She's not. People don't take her seriously. She takes herself very seriously, but a lot of other people don't take her seriously. But what you said is right, which is if the Democrats, if they've kind of become very, as you said, radicalized or whatever, more assertive, if they know that they can roll you on these things, they're going to roll you. And so if people like Nancy Mace cave into that, well, guess what? You're going to keep getting rolled. And that's why people are upset. This is what people are upset about. I think you remember, we were young, we'd play that board game Clue. What you have with Biden is like Professor Plum with the candlestick in a conservatory, it looks like, and you guys don't want to call it a game. You guys don't want to say what it is. That's what it looks like to me from the outside looking in, and people aren't happy about that. I mean, I don't know how much more information needs to be out there personally before you say something's happening here, or at least do an inquiry, an impeachment inquiry, to get more information. Nancy Mace is saying, look, we want to release the information to the public. Well, you don't have all the information. You need to get more information because they're withholding documents from you. And if you do an inquiry, you'll get more information. But she doesn't want to do that, and that's why people are really unhappy.
Colonel Mustard in the kitchen with the wrench. I mean, this is crazy. Right? I love it. I mean, listen. This is the thing right here. Is we have a situation where people absolutely have to. How do I say this right? Let me revise and extend that. People are concerned right now. I mean, you're seeing things like, these tech jobs where people were making big money and they were hardly even working. You're seeing, politicians. I heard someone, I think it was Peter Schweitzer has a new book that's about to come out about how Nancy Pelosi's husband just made crazy amounts of money. Some other people made money. They really had no experience in finance. We've seen Hunter Biden and all that, how much money he's making for painting, sitting on boards where he doesn't have any experience, didn't have experience in the energy sector, just so much stuff. So tag Romney over there, I mean, there's just like, what's going on? Meanwhile, people are just getting crushed in debt, crushed with inflation. And it's almost like, again, this goes back to Oliver Anthony, rich men north of Richmond, right? I mean, if you want to be rich, you're near the Capitol. It's kind of quasi Hunger Games. I mean, art imitates life. I mean, it's just bizarre. And people want answers. And that's why this election is very important. We the Nancy Maces of the world, like, we don't want these people that are just corporatized sellouts, essentially. Corporatized sellouts. And that's kind of, as Vivek would say, super PAC puppets. And people want real leadership. People want someone who's going to speak up for them. People just want an opportunity. Are you going to is this the land of the free, the home of the brave, or this is about corporatized sellouts? Are we going to be the shining city on the hill, or are we going to manage the decline? Like, what are we doing here, dude? And this is, the eve of the anniversary, of September 11th. And we definitely honor those people and remember that tragedy. But so in that context, do you want to be a corporatized sellout? Do you want to be the Washington Generals that always, lose? Or do you want to be the people on that flight over Pennsylvania that said, let's roll? We have to decide where we're at. This is a country of winners and bravery, and this is a country that was founded for standing up for people's rights and standing up for forming a constitution, having a General Washington says that they didn't want to be a king and serve for two terms, and this is what it is. I mean, we need to reassert the values and the constitutional republic and of what this country is about. And we need leadership on both parties, but certainly we need leadership on the Republican side to have an opposition to what's going on here. And also, I think the Democratic Party has to take a look at what's going on. Big election coming up, 2024. So much to talk about. We're going to talk about all this and more in the next hour on the John D. Villarreal Radio Show. You're listening to the John D. Villarreal Radio Show here on Newstalk 1040 and also live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Stay tuned. We'll be right back at you.
Look at that cold from moving in here.
Personal injury.
Ass, are you?
Hey, what's up, everyone? We're back. Second hour of the John D. Villarreal radio show here on Newstalk 1040 AM, Greater Tampa Bay area. Everywhere from Sarasota, Lakeland, downtown Tampa Bay, Brandon, Wesley Chapel, Clearwater. I love it. I love it. I love it. St. Pete and all over the place here. Bradenton. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. We're talking about all of it live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube, live on Facebook. Hey, we talked about President Biden and the trip overseas. We talked about Trump. We talked about the rally. We talked about Governor Nome endorsing President Trump. We're joined by Paul F. Villarreal. Let's talk about a couple of things. There's this interesting story about Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, who was taking a road trip with electric cars. Didn't work out super great. There were some people that were mad because maybe her staff was trying to hold, spots open for charging and maybe, is the infrastructure ready for it? But I really want to we're going to go to that and a lot of other things. We may talk about the Sean Strickland fight, who's now the champion, UFC, amazing. But I kind of want to talk about what's up on the Republican side. Paul, what do you see right now in terms of, we think it's going to be President Trump, but where's it going? do you think, where's the RNC in that? What's going on with, what's interesting as well, and we can also talk about this, is this, all these proceedings against Attorney General Paxton out there in Texas. And there's been maybe some, a lot of people are saying that this is like people that are kind of more aligned with the, Bush type policies and everything. And it's just really showing a lot of, that's been there's some very interesting clips out there. I'll just say that there's some very interesting clips. And so it kind of comes back to the same thing. The point I'm trying to make is this. What's your prediction? Like, where are we at on the Republican side now? What do you think is going to happen with this? I don't think anyone's going to be, not anyone. I don't think there's that many people are going to be watching, comparatively, are going to be watching the second debate. What do these candidates do? Who stays in? Who drops out? What's the calculus? You've got Chris Christie, who just looks like a spoiler now. And in fact, Governor Christie's negatives and Vice President Pence's negatives are pretty high out there. So what's the game plan? How do you think that plays out?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say, and just to kind of put this into perspective, is we talked about President Trump doing the rally on Friday night. Well, Saturday, during the day, he went to Ames, Iowa, to attend the Iowa versus Iowa State NCAA football game. Of course, it's a huge, those are the two main schools in the state. They're both really good. What he did was, first he went to a frat house, AGR, which is an agricultural frat. So they're
throwing
out
a
there,
football.
The guys I watched. What's that?
He was throwing a football around.
Yeah, he was throwing the football. They were having a cookout, so it was just like your typical frat party, maybe 300-400 people there. They were just so excited for him. He's throwing footballs, he's signing footballs, and he can still throw a football hard. There's an old video of him throwing a football at a Buffalo Bills game, and just a perfect spiral. And he still can throw the ball well. So he goes to this frat. They're loving him, whatever. He goes to the stadium. The reception he got at the stadium, because, again, I was watching footage of this, while it happened. It was Right Side Broadcasting Network. They were with him covering all this. It was like the Beatles. It was unbelievable. I've never seen him get that kind of reception out in public. You'll see him get that at rallies and stuff, but just out among the public, it was unreal. And now there's a couple of videos and some pictures out there like, oh, he got booed, and a couple of people made a gesture towards him. First of all, almost all that's fake. I was talking to somebody during the game who was at the game, and she's like, no, he's not getting booed or anything. People are loving him. And again, watching it happen in real time, it was just overwhelming. And Governor DeSantis was also there, and he almost got zero attention, like nothing. So it kind of gives you a sense of where it's at. And I mentioned the pollster that I go to a lot. He said today on his podcast, look, if DeSantis was a nominee, Biden would win Ohio and he would win Iowa. Well, guess what? If Trump's a nominee, he will crush in Iowa. He'll win Iowa by 10 points. So what that basically is coming around to say in a long fashion is Trump is the most competitive Republican nominee. It basically needs to be him, as much as never Trumpers don't want it to be him. If you actually are interested to be him, you mentioned earlier about always or only Trumpers. Well, that pollster has polled that. The ratio of only Trumpers to never Trumpers is like 3-1, meaning that if he doesn't run, the GOP is going to get crushed. They're going to get wiped out. So I think it is going to be him. I think it needs to be him for the Republicans to have their best chance. The same way that I think it needs to be Biden for the Democrats, for them to have their best chance. So, yeah, I think that's what it's going to be. And I just felt even more sure about that after the incidents of this weekend.
So who do you think, well, I mean, what's the next thing? What's the next movement in the campaign, right? I mean, who do you think stays in? What do you think is the impact of this second debate, if anything? Who gets out? And then how fast do we think they're getting out?
Yeah, so what's happening now? It's a good question. What's happening now is that after the first debate, the general feeling was we both felt that Vivek won the debate. But, people attacked him, and
yes,
his numbers are maybe about static. People believe that Governor Haley's numbers went up, and they felt like Governor DeSantis' numbers were static or went a little bit down. What is happening behind the scenes, according to this pollster who is in constant contact with donors, is that donors are apparently starting to move away from DeSantis towards Haley. And there seems to be a scramble between Tim Scott, Senator Scott, and Governor Haley to try to get those donors. And so you're seeing kind of like maneuvering behind the scenes about, hey, no, come to us, no, come to us. So I think the overall effect is Governor DeSantis is getting weaker. Governor Haley's getting stronger. Tim Scott, not exactly sure where he's at. Vivek's kind of where he's been. Look, as you mentioned earlier, Chris Christie, Governor Christie, Vice President Pence, these people are they're not relevant. And we both saw the same story earlier, which is Chris Christie said he's going to follow Trump around. I mean, he's just not, nobody
That's
cares
absurd.
about Chris Christie.
Nobody
now.
cares.
We've talked about this before on the show. In 2016, if I remember correctly, Chris Christie did a really good job in one of the debates, kind of hitting, rhetorically coming at, I think it was Marco Rubio, kind of like dinged him up or something. Nobody cares what Chris Christie says now. Nobody cares that he's attacking Trump. Nobody's listening, and it's not having any effect. So if you want to talk about who might drop out quick, I would say he's certainly somebody who could. Honestly, I'd look at Vice President Pence. Say, what is he doing? Asa Hutchinson, of course, I don't even think about. I mean, so those are different people.
Asa Hutchinson and Bergram. I mean, I think those governors. It's like, but then the question is like you said, what is Pence doing? And well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Forget about all of them. Let's put. It's like, and even no disrespect, even Representative, Haley, Governor Haley. It's like, I know there's a moment there and whatever, but I think, and
right.
like you said, I think there's a lot of up and down between her and it's almost an inverse relationship, or between her and Senator Scott, when because they're both in that same similar lane and same state and everything like that. So it's kind of like there's some maybe shared support there or overlapping support. If the real question, I think, not as much as it used to be, but still, is what is Governor DeSantis going to do? His campaign is not doing well. I saw some report of putting the alarm out for donors that they need to give money now. We need so much money. There was the all-in strategy on Iowa, and we're going to 99 counties, and I guess they did it and everything. And that just hasn't done anything. It doesn't, all the old tricks, the Rovian playbook, if you will, hasn't really panned out, in my opinion. I don't know. I'm not alleging that he's involved with Karl Rove or anything, but I'm just saying that the traditional, Republican, here's how you run a presidential campaign, it just hasn't worked right now, particularly against Trump. What do you think about that?
It hasn't worked. Yeah, it hasn't worked. I don't think it's going to work. As far as what DeSantis' strategy is, I think there's two things happening right now. Number one, they're starting to realize it's not going to work, and it's not going to happen, because you're starting to see there's a article, I want to say it was in Vanity Fair, just came out in the last day or two, and it was basically the blame game, where Jeff Rowe, the strategist, is blaming Casey DeSantis, and Governor DeSantis is blaming Jeff Rowe. So you're starting to get that. People are starting to point fingers at each other, meaning they know they're not going to win. The other thing, though, is behind the scenes still, according to this pollster, who, again, is constantly in contact with donors, they're still hoping against hope that somehow Trump is going to be defeated by all of these legal maneuvers. Maybe he's going to be removed from the ballot. Maybe they're going to replace him at the convention, something like this. So according to him, the campaign intends to hang on, even if they get blown out in Florida, which seems absurd. It just seems nuts, but I guess there are people still thinking that right now. Look, if I think it's clear, certainly to me and you, this was a huge mistake. This was a huge mistake for him to run this campaign. He was all set up to be the vice president and to be the heir apparent, and now look where he is. And it's, at some point, you have to come to grips with that. And unfortunately, as we both know this from being involved in politics for a long time, a lot of the donors, and of course, for the public out there, the donors control so much of what happens in politics because they finance it. They really believe that their money and we call this, you and I call this push button strategy. If we just push a button, everything's going to happen. They still think they're controlling things. Some of these people still think they're going to be able to defeat Trump. Well, you're not going to be able to defeat Trump. So I don't know what he's going to do. If I was him, I would personally be looking to get out relatively soon, before the elections start happening, because once the elections start happening, in my opinion, unless something drastically changes, you're going to get embarrassed. And that's, do you really want to do that? I mean, I don't know if I actually want
it's not
to
just
do that,
embarrassed. You're going to get politically, super damaged. So much of the wins in the sales of Governor DeSantis was coming off that around 20-point win in the midterms. Well, now, I mean, not even a year later, how's it look now? And he goes in, and we're about. I mean, we are months away. We are it is right now. We're about less than 4 months away.
4 months out.
4 months out, buddy. Yeah. Or less. And it's dude, what can you turn around and
there to change things?
Yeah. We've already had a debate. President Trump's not doing the second debate. Right. How many people are going to watch the second debate? Your polls are going down. Trump's are stable. He's got we're real clear politics, and it's been the same story. It's only become even increasingly so. If you look at the RCP average, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. You've got a combined, Trump's up 39.5. 39.5. What do you think is going to happen, dude? When they've indicted him. They've indicted him multiple times. Yeah,
and as we both know, once the once the primaries and the caucuses begin, then the campaign takes on its own momentum. In other words, once you start getting votes, then it all changes. You can't control things anymore. Well, guess what? If you get blown out in Iowa, you're done. I mean, I know what they're hoping is, well, we're going to change things. We're going to squeak out a win in Iowa, and then we'll get all the momentum. You're down like 35 points or 40 points in Iowa.
My gosh.
How are you going to do this? And I will tell you this. If people remember from 2016, Ted Cruz, Senator Cruz, was down by 10 points or something like that to President Trump. And he was end up squeaking out the win in Iowa. And the reason, what a lot of people think happened, was there was this questionable campaign where supposedly people went around telling them that Ben Carson was dropping out of the race. And so apparently a lot of those people that were going to support Ben Carson went to Cruz. Well, okay, Cruz won, and then what happened? Nothing. He got crushed in the rest of the primary. So even if you did win that, it doesn't mean anything. Like the Republican person, the person who won the Iowa caucuses, the last three cycles when it's competitive, I'm not talking like 2020 where Trump didn't win the nomination. So it's not even predictive. So I just think look, and we've both said this. We like Governor DeSantis. Governor DeSantis has done a great job in Florida. We're not impugning his character or anything like this. We're talking about this purely from a politically analytical perspective. This campaign is going really poorly.
Really poorly. It has been for a long time.
Yeah, it's never gone well. It started poorly, and it just keeps going downhill, in my opinion. He's a young man who has plenty of years left.
Yeah.
Just, at some point, I think you want to think about the future. And,
well, there's been
that's what I would advise him. Yeah.
I agree real quick. There's been tremendous miscalculation on this. And I think he was listening to people. I mean, some people. Now, again, when things don't go well, there's all kinds of speculation and people trying to spin things a certain way to save their own careers. And but the proverbial, no, I don't know. I don't want to even say it because I don't want to mischaracterize. But it's like, there's all kinds of different sayings for these situations. But I would say this: some people are like, oh, well, his wife's got the ambition, or it was, the campaign manager's blaming, this person, that person's blaming the campaign manager. It's like, is it the campaign? Is it the candidate? And it doesn't connect with people. Is it just Trump's too hard to be, whatever that it is, it's not working. And they spent so much money and donors think they're super smart. I mean, there's no shock. Yeah. And they think, just because you made money or being successful doesn't mean that you understand politics, whatever. And it's just a representation, I think, of our time. People know this is super serious. And when you've got, DeSantis that kind of changed some answers, or looks like there was some equivocation on the Ukraine answer there, or you got the real death knell for the campaign was when Vivek raises his hand on some stuff, and then, DeSantis looks around and finally raises his hand, on the Trump question. It's like, it's just so bad. It's such a bad look because it's just, to me, it's just transparently like, it just seems like, let me put it this way. Let me revise that. It seems and feels like, hey, this is finger in the wind. This is, I'm not taking a risk. This is prevent defense. I mean, let me see where other people are. I mean, it's just terrible. And I'm not saying he was the only one. I mean, I don't know what Chris Christie was doing. Raised his hand and he was wagging his finger. And I don't know what you're doing. Vice President Pence. I mean, as soon as DeSantis went up, it was like a dominoes. It was, Vivek first. Then Nikki Haley not too far behind, then Tim Scott, because Tim Scott's got to do whatever Nikki Haley does. Then Burgum's over there. If everyone's doing it, I better do it. And then DeSantis, okay, now I'm raising my hand. And then Pence, and then Chris Christie, I'm wagging. And and then Asa didn't. It just was just so weird, dude. And it just looks just like chicanery and silliness.
Yeah, it did. And, look, I mean, we know, like, historically, I think, President Nixon ran in 60. He lost. He came back. He did great. He won 2 terms, even though, of course, he had to leave early. It can be done. We know how, after 2016, Senator Cruz was in terrible shape. Now he's been essentially fully, his image is restored.
Well,
That's
yes
what I
and
would- if
no,
I were
because
governor-
I would say, sorry,
Yeah.
not to interrupt you, but just not to correct you, but I would say, yeah, people aren't mad at Senator Cruz maybe the way that they were, but I don't think Senator Cruz can get in there. And let's say Trump wasn't there.
Right.
I don't think Senator Cruz would be a favorite by any stretch to win the nomination. No.
Yeah, that's fair. The one thing Senator Cruz learned very well is do not run against Trump. So he knows better than to try to run, and that's why, in my opinion, he's not in this cycle. So he learned that lesson. One thing I'll say, though, about Senator Cruz, and I'll kind of contrast this with Governor DeSantis, Senator Cruz is a good speaker.
Oh, yeah.
Senator Cruz is a good trial lawyer.
Yeah, very smart, good
And
speaker,
so,
yeah.
As much as I respect Governor DeSantis, and Governor DeSantis is clearly a very intelligent man, he's not a charismatic campaigner. And I think kind of what you're seeing right now is what his campaign may have looked like in 2018 without Trump's help. So in other words, if you had Governor DeSantis against Senator Cruz in a campaign head-to-head, Senator Cruz might beat him because he's just a better speaker. He can talk better. He can.
No, that's a
work it
good
better.
point. But I think a lot of it now is people don't even care. I mean, no, there's always look. You have to have a good campaign and a good candidate, of course. But
Yeah.
I think people want the right policies, and they want someone who's going to stand up to this. Again, using Oliver Anthony, Richmond, north of Richmond, type of insane, unending bureaucracy where it was basically the haves and the has-nots, this weird quasi-neo-feudalism. It's not cool, and people know they want someone who's going to stand up. So the super PAC puppets just don't have the credibility anymore.
Right.
Someone like Vivek comes in, no experience, and just catches fire. It's not a populism thing. It's like, dude, people are sick of being just punked and pushed around.
One of the best things about, and it's kind of ironic, one of the best things about President Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy is they're both wealthy, which means they don't need anybody's money, which means they don't have to be super PAC puppets. There's no strings in them because they don't need it. And that's actually helps them to be able to possibly, I think certainly with Trump, do things more for the average person than the super PAC puppets will.
It's absolutely crazy. I mean, there's so much to talk about here. We're getting ready to come up on another break here and final segment coming up soon. Listen, there's a lot more to talk about. I want to talk about this electric car stuff with Secretary Granholm. We also should talk a little bit about the UFC thing. That's sort of interesting a little bit. And look, I don't mean to be hammering the politics, but I mean, there's been so much that's happened in the last 2 weeks. It's really kind of coming into focus here. We can also talk a little bit about Elon Musk. There's that story about the whole Starlink thing, the economy. We can also talk about Novak Djokovic, who's won his 24th big win, right? And the U.S. Open, just won the U.S. Open. There's just a lot going on right now, and just see if you have any comments out there. Stay tuned right here. You listen to John D. Villarreal on the John D. Villarreal Radio Show on Newstalk 1040 AM, live also on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Stay tuned. We'll be right back at it for the last segment. Okay, what's up, everybody? Last segment here, John D. Villarreal Radio Show on Newstalk 1040 AM. Right here in the greater Tampa Bay area. Everywhere from Sarasota, Wesley Chapel, Lakeland, Clearwater, all of it. We're still talking with Paul at Villarreal. We're still talking about politics. We've been talking about election 2024, Trump versus Biden. We're talking about Biden's trip over there to Vietnam. We're talking about, what's going on the Republican side here. Is anyone, I mean, obviously some people, but, how many people are going to watch the second debate? How much does that matter? But let's also talk about a little bit of sports, and we'll kind of wrap everything up here. There's been a lot of things happening in the sports world. We had down in, I believe in Australia, we had Sean Strickland beating Israel, the last style bender, Adesanya, and to get the championship there on the UFC, and he was heavy underdog. Definitely put on a boxing clinic there using that Philly shell and just walking through the excellent kickboxing of the former champion Israel Adesanya. That was pretty interesting. But we also have Novak Djokovic. And, there's been some political angles there with Djokovic. And I think there was a reporter at one point, I think I saw something on YouTube, and you can take that with a grain of salt, but I didn't watch the video, but something like it was like, was calling him a bad guy or something like that. Paul, tell me about this whole Djokovic thing. And, this is someone that was, not signed up for, all the push during the pandemic stuff. He had a hard time getting cleared to play certain places. Tell me what happened at the U.S. Open, and tell me why it means what it means.
Before I talk about Djokovic, I just want to also give credit to Coco Gauff, American woman, 19-year-old. She's from Delray Beach down there, and she just won her first U.S. Open. So that's really a great thing.
That is great.
It's kind of like taking the torch in some ways from the Williams sisters. So really happy for her.
I was going to say real quick, yeah, that is awesome. And I did think I saw a snippet of it. Like someone was saying something, and they were like, "No, she was praying. That she was praying, or in between sets, or doing stuff like that." That's what I'm saying. Like we've forgotten about all that. There used to be that like a lot of athletes would give credit to God or there's all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, and again, I'm not taking one side or another, but it just shows you what a different spot we are in now and where it is. Yeah. So, so let's bring it back to Djokovic and, what happened there? Who did he win? And why does this mean so much, in terms of his place in tennis?
Yeah. Okay. So Djokovic just won his 24th major title. There's 4 major titles per year. U.S. Open, Wimbledon, French Open, Australian Open. He's just won his 24th. Huge. That's one more than Serena Williams won, and it ties him with a woman named Margaret Court, who was from Australia, who won 24, but some of hers were done before the Open era, like before it was a different phase then. So this basically, in my opinion, makes him the greatest player ever. And he has never been a media darling, let's put it that way. Yeah. He said this yesterday at his press conference after the thing. He thinks some of it has to do with the fact that he's from Serbia. I have no idea if that's true or not, but he thinks it is. But I think the main thing for him, in addition to everything with the COVID situation, which is, if people don't know, he didn't take the vaccine and just didn't want to do it, and he didn't do it, and because he didn't do it, he wasn't allowed to participate in a couple tournaments. The main thing with him is that he was playing at the same time Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer were. And those two were looked at as the greatest men's players ever, and they were the fan favorites. And Djokovic was not the fan favorite. He was the spoiler. He was, maybe he said things that were a little bit out of line, people thought. Well, so the importance of yesterday was essentially climbing to the top of the sport, doing it his own way, and just solidifying that he could do it his own way and that he didn't have to kind of bend to what other people wanted him to do and do it that way. In fact, one of the things he did in the post-game ceremony was he put on a T-shirt with a picture of him and Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant and him were very good friends.
Sure.
Yeah. And the reason why he put this thing on, because he won his 24th major, and Kobe's jersey in the
Number
latter part of his
24,
career
sure.
was 24.
Mamba,
right.
yeah.
And so what he had on the jersey, it had like Mamba or Mamba mentality or something. Cause that's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
Kobe Bryant's
yeah.
nickname was the Black Mamba, and so the mentality was Mamba mentality. And he, I think that helped him. Djokovic is probably the best player in the sport, maybe ever in tennis, who can go into a hostile environment where the crowd is totally against him and beat them. And that's the way Kobe was. That's the way Michael Jordan was, which is not only will they beat you, they like beating you. They like silencing the crowd. And that's certainly the way Djokovic was. So this was definitely the defining moment of his career. And look, all credit to him. He's an incredible player. He's 36 years old. He won 3 of the 4 majors this year, which is unbelievable at his age. Who knows how many more he's going to win?
Yeah,
so
usually with tennis,
for him.
a lot of the champions are young. Some are actually very young.
Yeah.
And you have Roger Federer that is known as definitely a technician. You have Nadal that was a little bit more of a athletic, gritty player. Especially on like a clay court or something like that. How would you describe Novak's strengths and what kind of a player he is tennis-wise?
Well, the thing is, he could play any court. I mean, the only time that, you would say he was weaker on clay, but that's only because Nadal was so dominant on clay that nobody could beat him there.
Yeah.
Djokovic's playing style was he could get to everything. He could return everything. You couldn't get balls past him. He's incredibly flexible, so he can slide and kind of, stick his racket out and get the ball across. He's not a power hitter. He's not a power server. He's a guy that just is very mobile and will slowly beat you down. Not in the same way that Nadal would. Nadal would just kind of pound you into the ground. But Djokovic he's almost like a backstop. He'll just keep getting it back, just keep getting it back, just keep getting it back, just keep getting it back. And look, he grew up when he lived in Serbia. He was young. That's when there was conflict with NATO there. And, that had a big effect on him. He talks about that all the time. And he's just mentally tough. I mean, and it's what's interesting about him is when he was younger in his career, he was not mentally tough. He would quit in matches. Like if he was tired or if he quit. And now he's become the exact opposite of that. So, look, I'm just really happy for him. I think he's a great example of what somebody can accomplish, even if you feel like everybody's against you. Look, you've gone through this. When you were younger, went through stuff, and people told you stuff, and you're not going to be anything. And it's just, it's great when you can overcome that. And I think that he's a real testament to that, and a lot of people relate to him around the world. And
I think Einstein had, if I remember correctly, I think he had a quote, and I may get this a little bit off, but something like great spirits encounter stiff opposition from mediocre minds, or something of that nature. I mean, anytime you're doing something different, I mean, you see this with Trump, right? You see this with, he's not a politician, he's not following the playbook, he didn't go up to the ranks, he's not a super PAC puppet, the whole thing. It's like, people don't like change, but yet change is the one thing that's constant throughout life and throughout the universe and stuff. And so you have to be comfortable with change because everything's constantly changing. And, there's another story here, someone that embodies change and someone that definitely, is doing a lot to change technology and change the way we're doing stuff and entrepreneurship is no less than Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk, there's more headlines here and more some negative headlines. You had no less than Jake Tapper, some would say, was metaphorically speaking, melting down in regards to this whole thing with Starlink and how Elon Musk did not allow Starlink to be used for some of this Ukraine stuff. What's going on with Elon Musk? And now, this used to be someone that was in a lot of ways the darling of the press with Tesla and Silicon Valley. And now, post Twitter, now X takeover, the buying, the merger, the buyout, just so much negative stuff. What is the deal with this whole thing with Starlink and now it's starting to seem as well like I think we're seeing things where maybe there's people are starting to look towards an end with this thing with Ukraine and what's going on there.
Yeah. Now I think I have all this correct, but just I want to say I may be missing like one or two points here, but this is my paraphrase of what's happening here. Okay, so my understanding is that it came out because someone I think it's Walter Isaacson, just sort of wrote a biography about Elon. And I believe in the biography it says that he didn't want Starlink to be used for a certain operation in Ukraine. And I think it was supposed to be like some operation taking place against Crimea. Now, Elon has said publicly for months, don't want Starlink used for offensive purposes. I'll let people use it for defensive purposes, but I don't want it used for offensive purposes. And what he said to that is, look, I don't want to be somebody who contributes to conflict escalation. We don't know where this can stop. And I don't want to do that. And of course, it's his product. He doesn't have to allow it. It's like
whatever happened to the private companies? Whatever happened to all the private? These are private companies, right? If they want to kick off conservatives, they want to do whatever they want. It's fine. Right. And the thing is, too, wasn't this some kind of potential? Apparently, the speculation was this was some kind of thing against the Russian fleet or something, which would have been like they would have sank the Russian fleet there. I mean, what would have happened then? I mean, who knows where this could have ended up? I mean, here's the thing, and I'll just say this real quick. If you want to postulate and I'm not criticizing anything, I'm just saying logically. I'm not objecting. I'm not saying anything. I'm not making a statement. I'm just saying logically work with me through this. For those in the press and elsewhere, maybe in policy and administration, whatever, that are Putin's, and this is my super characterization and whatever, but Putin's crazy, Putin's dangerous, he's an authoritarian, he's madman, why would you go and provoke someone like that and sink their fleet? I mean, I understand if you're in a conflict, but I mean, in other words, for both sides. And this is always the whole thing with look, liberals would call Ronald Reagan crazy, and Star Wars was wacky, and maybe the Russians thought he was a madman or whatever. At what point is enough, and does this start potentially getting to a level that neither side wants, right? I mean, these are two major superpowers, and yes, I mean. There's issues with, I'm sure, ammunition and supply lines and all kinds of different stuff. But at a certain point, like how, once you escalate, you may have gone way too far. And who wants that? I mean, like how, what the end game on this doesn't look great for anybody. In fact, if anything, I mean, I don't know. I mean, has NATO won here? Has Ukraine won? What does winning look like? Yeah. And meanwhile, how much money have we spent? And meanwhile, I've seen some other, what's up with Maui? I'm seeing a lot of different things. And some people are starting to say like, hey, maybe what about the land? And there's some weird stuff. I don't want listen, we spent a lot of money. And what's the end result going to be? I think now there's starting to be some positioning in there because this thing could be winding down here, Paul. How do you think this all settles up?
Well, first thing I want to say is I'm glad you brought up Maui because when at Trump's rally in South Dakota on Friday, I think one of the loudest crowd reactions he got was when he mentioned the money spent on Ukraine versus the money sent to Maui. And I mean, the crowd booed so loud on that. That might have been the greatest reaction of anything of the whole night. So people are getting weary, I think, of that. And look, Western sources. I follow the Ukraine conflict pretty closely, and I try to look at sources from all different angles, not just the Western media, because when it comes to conflicts, I think you have to look at a variety of sources.
Yeah, look, lots of sources.
Yeah, Western media is now starting to say that the Ukrainian counteroffensive, which was supposed to be a large-scale operation, it's still ongoing. It'll probably be going on for another 6 weeks because in the middle of October you get into mud season over there and you really can't make much headway doing anything. So it kind of calms down then. They've made very minimal gains at really high cost. And so I think there's a man, I want to say Richard Kent or something Kent. He's some former military man who writes for one of the British papers. 6 weeks ago, he's like, oh, Putin's not ready for what's coming and all stuff. Now he's like, it looks like the counteroffensive has failed and the West has to be prepared to be humiliated. So that's kind of where we're heading towards now. Like, it's not looking great right now. And I think the best case scenario is, well, okay, the counteroffensive didn't work so well right now, but we'll get ready and we'll do more in 2024. Look, what's happening now, according to people that are military observers, people that really know this stuff, is Russia, their military, is a lot more capable than what I think NATO thought it was. And what I've seen people say, including Douglas McGregor, who worked for Trump, and he's a colonel in the U.S. Army, I believe, or retired colonel, very smart man. He has a YouTube, he is on Twitter. Look, we fought the U.S., the recent conflicts the U.S. has been in are like Afghanistan, Iraq. We're fighting against overmatched opposition, whereas the Russians are more like a peer-level competitor, and we're not used to that. We're not used to dealing with somebody at that level. And a lot of what's happening in this confrontation is kind of what is attrition warfare, which is almost like World War I, trenches, all this stuff, artillery. Russia is expert at that. That's how they conduct operations. They're much better than almost anybody else in the world at that. NATO and certainly the Ukrainian troops who are just learning, they're not good at that. And they don't have the armaments to match what Russia's doing. And so I just think it's kind of accumulating here. Look, there's been a great loss of life. It's really, really tragic.
Totally.
And as we said, there hasn't been a lot of gains. And so as at some point people are going to say, well, what have we gotten for our money here?
And where's the money for Maui? And where's the money for people's houses?
Right.
And some of these people have lived in ancestral homes over there for so long, and the land is so it's the most expensive state. Yeah, right.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you said that, because if you look at kind of the linguistic map of Ukraine, like the southeastern portion of it is heavily Russian. So it's like, I mean, some of those people are partial towards Russia. So you're also dealing with that. That's also part of this.
Well, and I'm also talking about I was also talking about Maui and stuff like that. Like, I mean, there's been talk about like I think the government trying to buy the land or something, and people are like, what's going on here? I mean, this is, and then you had that weird thing with Oprah and The Rock and saying, oh, hey, let's raise money, whatever. And these guys are like pretty much like billionaires or half a billion or whatever it is. I mean, there are hundreds of millions of dollars and stuff like that. Like, it's just, I mean, people are broke right now, bro. I mean, and then we're Mitch McConnell, it sounds like, it's Republicans too, can't wait to send more money to Ukraine. I mean, what are we doing? And so, okay, we have a few minutes left here. Let's spin this forward. Yeah. And so basically, I want to just bring people up to speed on that. Looks like it's a mess. We don't know. Maybe it's going to wind down, but doesn't look like there's. I mean, very, very, very questionable over there. But they want to put more money. It looks like it's going to be Trump versus Biden. Do you think that? Do you have confidence? And I think Congressman Donald sort of is a little bit heading up some of this. I think that's right. I mean, are the Republicans going to be able to match what the Democrats are doing with in terms of, trying to get out the vote early, trying to get, chase down that kind of thing? Are we prepared are the Republicans prepared for the election of 2024? And how bad do you think the economy is going to get? I'm seeing a lot of gloom and doom scenarios out there, but they're backed up by some research and some data. And there's definitely, this time is very different in terms of how many, like, real estate, how many homes are owned by investors and how many homes are sitting vacant, and et cetera, et cetera. What do you think we're looking for in 2024 in terms of, are the Republicans ready for this campaign, do you think, number one? Number two, to what degree, and specifically, are they ready for the early voting stuff, number one? Number two, do you think that there will be a rallying, or do you think we're going to have a 5%, 10%, 2%, never Trump type of thing, quasi potentially sabotage type of deal? And the third factor is will the economy be about the same it is now, or do you think it's going to crash? I think those are three outstanding questions that impact 2024.
Okay, number one, do I think the Republicans are ready? They're more ready than they were, because I think they learned in 2020 and 2022 trying to get people out on Election Day isn't enough. And so I think that the Trump campaign and the Republican Party realizes that in a greater extent. Now, that doesn't mean they're prepared to match the Democrats. I do not think they're going to be able to match what the Democrats can do, because the Democrats are too far ahead. But if they can just compete and get in the game, that might be enough. If you look at the polls right now, like kind of the RCP about Trump versus Biden, it's maybe like 44.5 Biden, 44.1 Trump. If you had an election on Election Day, just one day, and you have an incumbent that far under 50, Trump would win. But that's not how it's going to be. It's going to be early voting. It's going to be et cetera. So we'll have to see. I do think Byron Donalds, is Congressman Donalds, is heading it up, and they're going to have to do that. Number two, is the Republican Party going to rally to Trump? It's going to be really interesting to see that. I do think that there are signs that donors are starting to rally to him. I have seen stories about donors who were supporting DeSantis saying that they are going to switch to Trump.
Well, the Governor Noem endorsement, you'd think, is also a signal of that.
Yeah, definitely.
In my opinion.
But I'm not naive. There are people, in my opinion, who want Trump to lose.
Oh, yeah, I agree with
side.
that. Yep.
So,
yep.
And
it wouldn't surprise me if some of those people are orbiting the Bush world and the Bill Kristol world.
Right. Correct. And number three, what was the third one again?
The third one's the economy. I mean, and I guess I'll throw a fourth one, but real quick. Do you think the economy is going to hold up or is it going to crash? And also, what about President Biden? And I mean, health-wise, I mean, is he going to be? Do you think? That's an X factor too. So let's tackle those super quickly as we wind down.
Yeah, the economy is in much worse shape than what people think it is, than the average person thinks.
I agree.
But as we both know, they're going to do every possible thing they can to prop it up. And there's no question to float it up until after the election. I don't know if that's going to work or not. We're going to find out. They're going to try. Will President Biden hold up? They're going to do everything possible, in my opinion, to make sure he does. I know there's people out there every day, he's going to drop out and Michelle's going to come in. No. Michelle might be the only person, Michelle Obama, who has any chance to be where his numbers are, but she doesn't want to run. I've heard that from numerous people. Biden is your best chance. And because of that, I think he has to do it. And honestly, I think, he's taken so many vacation days. And my guess is if they have to keep him vacationing and low power, low key until then, they're going to do that. So I would say, he'll probably hold up if I had to make a determination.
Interesting times. Well, I mean, my point is what impact. I mean, I think he's going to be there. I think he's going to be on the ballot. I think he's going to be the candidate.
Yeah.
But what impact politically? Because I think people have kind of had a little bit enough of all this. You know what I mean? On both sides, whether it's Senator Fetterman or even calls for Leader McConnell or President Biden. I mean, in part because things are really tough. So it's very interesting. But we're happy to be here on Newstalk 1040 AM and John D. Villarreal show and talking with you and sharing with you and trying to figure it all out together. But I'm an optimist. I believe in us. I believe in America. And I believe in you. And I appreciate you out there I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. We'll see you next week. Stay blessed. You're listening to John D. Villarreal Radio Show here on Newstalk 1040 AM and also live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week.